So just to catch up, the project sponsor is that executive that has the responsibility for the project's outcome. And they also have the authority to assign resources for the project. So they have the money to provide the budget for the project, and they make decisions that will directly affect the project. So having an active and engaged project sponsor is critical to the success of your project. Does anyone have any questions about who the project sponsor is or what their role is? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to go proceed. So the project sponsor has many functions, and some of these are important then to understand how you would engage with that person. And this sponsor is going to set the boundaries of the project as well. So establishing that relationship is important to do early at the outset of the project. So your project sponsor is going to set expectations. They are going to establish what the goals and the business value of the project is. So the project sponsor is going to work with the project manager to create what the key performance indicators are that will be used to determine the success of the project. So this is very important because the project team may think that they've done a good job, but ultimately you're going to want to make sure that the project sponsor agrees that you've achieved your goals. Again, the project sponsor secures the resources that the project team needs. And so this could be, human resources, financial resources, other types of capital. And in some cases, the project sponsor may also be needed to help you champion some type of request. So that could be additional budget, or it could be more time to complete the project if some sort of changes have caused your schedule to slide. And another key role of the project sponsor is that your project sponsor is going to communicate with other executives. So again, they're going to be your champion. So they will be reporting on the status of the project, maybe at some higher level executive meetings, and they'll be the one that brings up topics when issues arise that are outside of the project team's authority. And they will also ensure that the project remains aligned with high-level business objectives. So, especially if the project is a long-term project, your project sponsor is going to, again, be your champion to ensure that your project isn't killed when budget cuts happen, for example. That's an example of how the project sponsor helps. Any questions? Okay, so let's move on to the project charter. Has anyone ever heard of a project charter? And what do you think a charter might mean? Okay, so the project charter is a formal document that is issued by the project sponsor that gives authority for the project to even exist. So why are we doing this project? Why do we need to spend this time and money to do this thing, whatever the thing is? So this establishes the authority of the project manager to apply resources and to initiate the activities toward that project. So there are many templates available, particularly on the Project Management Institute website. You can find lots of different documents for a project charter. You can probably just Google project charter and find lots of different templates. You can also just create one of your own. And based on the type of project that you're initiating, they'll have different content. Lots of companies have their own project charter template, but a good project charter will have at a minimum the following. So you have a title. What is the title of this project? And sometimes they're very descriptive. Sometimes they have code names. So they'll be like Project Blue Jay, Project Red, Project Zebra, Project XYZ. It can be all kinds of things. And then you want to identify who are the project sponsor and the project manager. And then the purpose or description of the project. You want to be somewhat descriptive here about what's going to be done. Why are we doing this project? And then the scope of the project. Here's where you set the boundaries, what is and is not included in this project. And this is really important because it's for the benefit, particularly for the benefit of the project manager, to establish the guardrails, if you will, of what's to be accomplished. And you want to be very clear what the purpose, or rather the scope of this project is, because you don't want to have an unclear expectation of what's going to be accomplished. And then the key deliverables of the project. So in the course of performing the activities, what is going to be the output of the project? So are there reports due at different milestones? Are we going to have prototypes due at different milestones? Are we going to have tests performed? And then at the conclusion of the project, what are we going to deliver? What is the final outcome of the project? Because ultimately you're doing this for some sort of result. And what is that result going to be? So you want to be as clear as possible what those things are. And then your project charter should have a statement of the budget and schedule and any constraints to that budget and schedule. You want to also identify any known assumptions or risks. And this area can be a little bit, oh, I apologize, my dogs are barking. This can require a bit of brainstorming on the part of the sponsor and the project manager. And so this is a good point. This the project charter needs to be developed together. And then finally, the authorizing. Okay, Karen asks for an example of an assumption. So an assumption could be that this project is contingent on federal funding being available first quarter of 2023. or this this project is going to be kicked off, and that it is going to be in support of, let's say it's a lean project, and that you will have an adoption rate within the factory no later than some date. Is that clear for the team? Lori, can you think of another assumption that you might want to put in the charter?
Hi, yes. It could be who is assigned as team leads that the sponsor has identified already to join the project team. It could be that we assume that the project will meet a strategic objective of the organization as a whole, and what that strategic objective is, so that when people read the charter or sign up and agree to the charter, they know why they're doing this project, that it relates to the organization's strategic objective.
Those are excellent points. Thank you, Lori. And then finally, you want to get the signatures of the project sponsor and the project manager, including the date, because this secures the authorization of the charter. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? You can enter them in the chat, or you can just ask them. And again, I apologize for the barking. My cleaning lady is here. Okay, next we're going to talk about identifying stakeholders. So a stakeholder is anyone who may influence a project's performance or outcome. So this goes beyond just the members of your project team. If I look at the project management body of knowledge, the PMBOK guide from the Project Management Institute, a project manager, it recommends that a project manager engage stakeholders proactively and to the degree needed to contribute to project success and customer satisfaction. So that's somewhat ambivalent because it requires the project manager to use their own knowledge and their own guidance, if you will. So it's very broad. And to efficiently engage your stakeholders, you have to first identify who they are, and you have to consider who's going to be influenced or have the ability to influence the project's performance, and then who can influence the outcome. So begin to consider this, and I highly recommend that you create a stakeholder register. And this register is going to be a living document, because as you go through the project, you're likely to recognize new stakeholders at different phases of the project. So your immediate and first reaction should be that, well, my project team members are obviously stakeholders, because they're going to be performing the activities that are generated by the project. So they're obviously going to have the ability to influence the outcome of the project. And then there are internal stakeholders. Who are the internal team members within your organization that could be affected by the change, whatever the change is that is being created by this project that we're going to perform. And then there are external stakeholders. So these could be customers. This could be regulatory bodies. It could be the industry at large. It's anyone who could be purchasing the service or product, or that is affected by the product in general. And then there are support teams. So think about the people that might need to test or create documentation, market or sell whatever the solution is that your project is going to provide. So this is where it gets a little bit more difficult to identify who the stakeholders might be. So think about the IT systems that could be affected. And will training need to be developed for the solution that you're going to be provided? Will new marketing materials need to be provided? What about training manuals, documentation of some sort? Let's say it's some sort of product, some equipment, and it's a repairable type of product. So do you have to have repair manuals? Do you have to have a repair depot of some sort? That sort of, do you have to have repair instructions created? There's a lot that could go into that. So you want to consider all of those support teams as well. And again, I do recommend that you create a stakeholder register, and you begin to collect their contact information and any other notes about your stakeholders that would be helpful. Any questions? So Karen had the question, do you include individual names and so forth? And yes, you can make, because the stakeholder register is something that the project manager may choose to share with the team at large, or you can keep just for your own benefit. You can make it as detailed as you choose. Any other questions? All right, and as I said previously, the stakeholder register is going to change as you begin to go through the phases of the project, and you realize, oh, we need to tell XYZ team that this project is underway and how they could be affected, or we need to bring them in because we need their help at this phase. And some of those things may not be known at the outset of the project. Okay, moving on. So now we get to the work breakdown structure, or WBS. So creating a work breakdown structure is the process of decomposing the tasks and the work assignments into their smallest work components that will be completed by the team during the course of the project. So there are many different methods to do this, and you could, this is something that you could Google. So the WBS is a hierarchy form. You could also use task boards, a backlog, but they all use predictive planning to identify the tasks that must be completed by the project, which is, of course, the scope of the project, and then breaking these down into the lower level details. So even agile project management, which is an iterative method, still uses these high-level themes called epics that can be decomposed into lower-level user stories or backlogs. And so once the work has been broken down to its lowest level, individual, unique tasks, you can create the WBS hierarchy, and you assign each of those work units and a unique number. And eventually all of these tasks are then organized into this hierarchy structure based on this numbering system. And according to you identify any dependencies between the tasks, and then once you've got the WBS created, you begin to assign durations to those tasks, and that's how you create the schedule. So this is an example of a very simple WBS. So at the top level, you've got your main project work, which is a home renovation. And then at the very first level, you've got the 4 main work packages. So 1.1 is the planning, 1.2 is demolition, 1.3 is construction, and 1.4 is interior decorating. And so do you see how, so you go from 1 to the 1.1, 1.2. So you see how the numbering system is enumerated. So these are the 4, and then here's the next level of the lower level of decomposition has 3 numerals in the numbering system. So you've got the budget and the blueprints are under planning. Under demolition, you've got the dining room wall and the tile flooring. And again, these have 3 digits in the nomenclature. And then the same thing under construction and the same thing under decorating. But see, And so their schedule will have to be redone, and the schedule that they originally planned will start to slide because now they have to go and insert work that wasn't originally planned. coming up that will dive into risk deeper, but to try and give you a satisfactory answer, risk can be anything that is going to impact your project that is unforeseen, but not unforeseeable. So we always want to look at a risk's probability and its impact. So maybe it's something that what are the odds? What's the probability that X may happen? But if it does happen, what is its impact going to be? So maybe it's not very probable, but if it does occur, it's going to be really bad. Or something could be, it's very probable this is going to occur, but even if it does occur, it's not that bad. But then you've got things that, oh, it's highly probable and it's going to be bad. Those are the bad ones. So a risk could be something like our funding for our project is going to be, canceled. Or a risk could be something like our two primary engineers on the project are both going to be sick at the same time, and the project's going to come to a halt, because that has happened. Or I don't know, I was on a project in Montreal and my partner had a heart attack and died. A risk could be something not as impactful, but we were in the lab and the test failed and we had to repeat it. Or gee, try as hard as we could, this code is just very difficult and it's taking us twice as long to write the software. Other things could be like our suppliers are just taking a long time getting the quality of this raw material to the point where we need it, and our prototype isn't ready when, to meet this milestone. Things like that. Those are all examples of risk.
Karen, your question, the probability of the lab being at capacity. I, as a project manager, I can look at the schedule and see when our product is going to be ready to go to the lab. I can look out ahead and say, okay, in a month, this product is going to be ready to go to the lab. And I know that my labs, I can submit a purchase order to them with the proper documentation, which would be the test plan and the spec of the product. I can only give it to them 3 weeks out. They won't book more than 3 weeks out. So I'm going to be giving myself a reminder at 3 weeks out, which is in another week, to start calling around to labs and get my product booked for testing. In the case of probability of capacity being a risk, I know that there might be 5 labs in my area and maybe 2 out of the area that I could use for this testing. So the probability might be high, but the impact might be very low because I have options. So when I do my risk analysis that Angela is going to train us on later, she'll talk about how to rate the probability or the likelihood of it happening and the impact that it has, and how to quantify that. Does that help, Karen? Yes.
Yes, having contingency plans or mitigating plans ways to mitigate that risk are always very helpful, recommended. Yeah. All right. Are we ready to move on then? Okay. All right. So that brings us to a conclusion. And that's Project Kickoff. Next week, we'll talk about another set of topics. I guess at this point, I really just want to open up the floor to any further questions. If you want to open your mics.
Yeah, just commenting again, like on the risk, Karen.
Mhm.
So risk is seen from financial aspects, from scope, from hours, from resources. So say, for example, you had, resources of 10 people and you thought potentially you needed 11 people to sum out for some risk. That would be seen in, in your resources for people. Financial risk could be like, you thought it was going to be $100 and now it's $110. So you would put in a little bit more contingency to amount for those risks. And as Angela knows and Lori knows, there's a lot of programs out there that obviously have algorithms and deep things in there to add risk, which is helpful. But a lot of the times, it takes the project manager and the experience to kind of understand what potential risks could come out of those things. But definitely appreciate the talk, Angela, and kind of going over these. It was very, very descriptive. And Lori, appreciate your experience as well.
This is always good for me. I've been, doing project management for so long, but it's so important that we go back to these basic things and refresh our memory and make sure that I'm not skipping anything. And, one of the things I want to mention about the stakeholder register and why that's so important to me is communication is such an important part of what we do. It's a huge percentage of what a project manager does to achieve the outcomes. And so that stakeholder register helps me create a plan, a communication plan, to make sure that I'm letting my stakeholders know what's going on. And that to me is one of the critical pieces of what I heard today too.
I thought of something else as we were discussing the schedule, and I just wanted to mention that sometimes your schedule will change because of scope creep. And I mentioned that just very briefly, but I didn't really explain what it was. And scope creep is when the scope that was originally defined in the project charter is enlarged. And that could be for a number of reasons, but oftentimes it's because the customer, whether that's an internal customer or an external customer, has decided they want to add additional requirements to the project. Now, let's hope that if additional scope is being added to the project, additional resources are being added as well. So there would be more budget, possibly additional team members to or at least additional hours to cover that scope creep. And that would be one reason why your schedule might need to be updated and re-baselined and said, you would say, all right, this is the schedule as we originally planned it, but because of the addition of these new requirements, we're proposing and now presenting our updated schedule including those new tasks based on these new requirements. And that is something you may see, and it's completely acceptable to revise your schedule in that case. Any questions about that?
I have a question, Angela.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
If I have say my customer
Mm-hmm.
is adding to the scope of my project, and they decide they want an add-on to the widget that we're building.
Sure.
And I have to go, do I need to go back to my project sponsor and update my charter? And then if the charter's updated, does that give me the authority to re-baseline the schedule and say, okay, our schedule's changed, everybody, this is the new schedule?
Ideally, yes. Yes. And because you want something in writing that authorizes you to do that. And especially if you're dealing with a customer, or let's say you've got a contract with a subcontractor for some portion of the work that you're performing. You may have contracts that have to be updated, and you want all of that documentation to be properly updated, archived. You need a paper trail for all these changes.
And one of the things I like to start with when there's a change is how does it, to document the impacts. How does it impact the budget? How does it impact the schedule? How does it impact the resources? How does it impact the risks?
Mm-hmm.
And then make sure that the customer knows, whether the customer is my manager or a paying customer. Okay, you asked for this. Here's how it's going to impact. Are you sure you want this to occur? And then go into those changes of the charter and so on.
Yes. And so change management is another facet of project management. And again, Lori, as you mentioned, communication of the change and how you manage that is very, very important. And how you document it in the project, but also like if a product is impacted, and again, we'll talk about that in a later course, but there's just a lot of ripples. All right, we're coming up on the end of our time. Is there anything else I can answer for you today about Project Kickoff? All right, if not, I thank you for your time and so glad to have you here today. I will be sharing this recording later and hope to see you next week. Thanks, everyone. Have a great morning.